When the world burned outside, they found solace in ink and imagination.
March 15th, 1944. Over the skies of Brunswick, Germany, Captain James "Red" Holt watches helplessly as another B-17 dies. The Memphis Belle II engines, smoking, falling behind formation, becomes a magnet for 6 German fighters. 43 seconds. That's how long the crippled bomber lasts before exploding into a fireball that takes 10 American boys with it. Holt's P-47 Thunderbolt screams toward the attack, but he's 3 miles away, and the Germans know it. By the time he arrives, there's nothing left but falling debris and empty sky. This scene repeats itself 37 times in the last month alone. The Luftwaffe has discovered a devastating new tactic that's killing American bomber crews at an unprecedented rate, and nobody in the 8th Air Force knows how to stop it. But tonight, in an officers' club in England, a 24-year-old technical sergeant who failed his pilot exam is sketching an idea on a cocktail napkin. An idea so insane that when he first presents it, squadron commanders will call it the dumbest thing they've ever heard. An idea that violates multiple articles of the Geneva Convention and will remain classified for 47 years. Within 30 days, this crazy scheme will lure 40 German fighters into carefully prepared ambushes, save an estimated 180 American lives, and fundamentally change aerial warfare forever. The sergeant's name is Daniel Weiss. His background, commercial advertising artist from Brooklyn. His military experience, 0 combat missions. His job, painting kill markings on airplane fuselages. What he's about to do will prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the biggest gun or the fastest plane. Sometimes it's just understanding that what the enemy sees matters more than what actually exists. The crisis begins long before March 1944. It begins in December 1943. When German ace Hermann Joseph Pips Priller writes a tactical doctrine that will kill thousands of Allied airmen. The document, distributed to Jagdgeschwader 26, contains one simple observation that changes everything. A healthy bomber fights. A crippled bomber runs. It separates from the herd. Its escort cannot protect what it cannot reach. We do not hunt the strong, we cull the weak. The results are immediately devastating. By January 1944, 73% of bombers lost over Germany are stragglers aircraft that fell behind formation due to battle damage, mechanical failure, or wounded crew. The Luftwaffe develops Wolfpack tactics specifically designed to exploit this vulnerability. German fighters orbit at distance, waiting for the telltale signs. Trailing smoke, feathered propellers, aircraft losing altitude. Then they strike with overwhelming force against isolated targets. The mathematics are brutal and simple. A healthy bomber flying in tight formation presents a defensive nightmare. 50 caliber machine guns from multiple aircraft create interlocking fields of fire. German fighters attacking such formations face withering defensive barrages. But a damaged bomber limping home alone. That's a different story entirely. No mutual support, no coordinated defense. Just one wounded bird and 10 terrified boys watching death approach at 300 miles per hour. American Fighter Command tries everything to counter this tactic. They assign dedicated rescue fighters to escort damaged bombers home. The Germans simply wait until those escorts reach their fuel limit and turn back, then attack the defenseless bomber. They increase fighter patrols around bomber routes. The Germans attack in the gaps between patrol sectors. They develop new radio protocols for damaged aircraft to call for help. The Germans jam the frequencies and track the signals to find their targets even faster. Major General William Kepner, commander of 8 Fighter Command, holds a crisis meeting on February 28, 1944. The mood in the room is funeral. 17 squadron commanders sit around a table covered with loss statistics that tell a story of systematic slaughter. Gentlemen, Kepner says, his voice tight with frustration. We have a problem that tactics alone cannot solve. The enemy has turned our wounded into bait. Every crippled bomber becomes a death sentence for its crew, and often for the fighters we send to save them. The statistics on the table paint a nightmare. Since January 284, heavy bombers lost. That's 2,840 men who won't see home again. Fighter losses trying to protect stragglers. Another 97 aircraft. 116 pilots dead or missing. The Luftwaffe is bleeding them dry using a tactic so simple, so ruthless, that American commanders can't find a counter. Every expert in the room agrees on one thing. The solution is preventing damage in the first place. Better armor, tighter formations, more defensive firepower. But these are engineering solutions that will take months or years to implement. Meanwhile, boys are dying every single day. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Dickman of the 359th Fighter Squadron throws his cap across the briefing room after losing 3 fighters trying to protect a single damaged B-24. "They're using our wounded as traps," he shouts. "We see a limping bomber. We rush to help. Suddenly we're outnumbered 4-1 with our fuel halfway gone. It's brilliant. It's ruthless. And I don't know how to stop it." The consensus among tactical experts is unanimous and depressing. There is no counter to this strategy except to abandon the stragglers. Several senior officers quietly suggest implementing a triage policy. Damaged aircraft are on their own. The proposal reaches General Dwight Eisenhower's desk with supporting documentation. Eisenhower reads it in silence. Then he picks up a red pencil and writes one word across the top of the page in letters 2 inches high. Never. But noble sentiment doesn't save lives. The losses continue. Bomber crews develop a new fear that transcends the normal terror of combat. They're not afraid of being shot down anymore. At least destruction is quick. What terrifies them is being crippled. Getting wounded means a slow 30-minute chase across hostile sky while German fighters take turns shooting pieces off your airplane. It means watching your friends die trying to reach you in time. It means knowing you've become bait in a trap that will kill everyone who tries to help you. The psychological toll becomes measurable in ways that shock medical officers. Mission abort rates climb 17%. Pilots report seeing battle damage that maintenance crews cannot find. Some crews request transfers to the Pacific Theater, where at least the enemy fights in ways they understand. By mid-March, the 8th Air Force is approaching a breaking point. Not from lack of courage or equipment, but from a tactical problem nobody can solve. The Germans have weaponized compassion itself. Every instinct to help wounded comrades becomes a vulnerability the Luftwaffe exploits with lethal efficiency. Into this desperate situation walks Technical Sergeant Daniel Weiss. 24 years old. Former commercial artist for the J. Walter Thompson Advertising Agency. Current crew chief for the 359th Fighter Squadron. 0 combat experience. Never flown in a fighter aircraft. His job involves maintaining landing gear hydraulics and painting kill markings on fuselages. Not exactly the resume of someone who's about to revolutionize aerial warfare. But Weiss possesses something the career military men lack. An outsider's perspective unburdened by assumptions about how air combat should work. Born in Brooklyn to immigrant parents who ran a kosher delicatessen, Weiss grew up sketching on butcher paper and dreaming of becoming a fine artist. The Depression intervened. Reality meant working at J. Walter Thompson, creating advertisements for Pond's Cold Cream and Lucky Strike cigarettes. His specialty making products look like something they weren't. Making the ordinary seem extraordinary. Making people see what you wanted them to see. When Pearl Harbor happened, Weiss tried to enlist as a pilot. He failed the vision test. Mild color blindness. The irony would haunt him later that the eye condition that kept him out of cockpits might have saved his life by forcing him to see warfare differently. They made him a crew chief instead, which Weiss compared to training to be Rembrandt and getting assigned to paint houses. But he's meticulous with details. He understands visual perception in ways most people don't. When aircraft return from missions, Weiss is the one who surveys battle damage coordinates, repairs returns, planes to service. Over 6 months, he learns to read destruction like a language. He knows what flak bursts look like on aluminum skin, how they tear and puncture in distinctive patterns. He knows how bullet holes cluster based on attack angles. He knows which damage is fatal and which merely looks dramatic. He develops an encyclopedia of wounds in his mind, cataloging how different weapons create different signatures on metal. Most importantly, he learns the difference between damage that kills and damage that merely scares. A 2-inch hole through a non-critical fuselage section looks terrifying, but doesn't affect flight capability. A tiny fuel leak that leaves a smoke trail appears minor, but can down an aircraft in minutes. Appearance versus reality. The foundation of advertising. The foundation of deception. The foundation of what's about to become the most controversial tactical innovation of the European air war. On the evening of March 15th, Weiss sits at a corner table in the officers' club, technically off-limits to enlisted men, but tolerated because he's popular with pilots and good at listening while they process the day's losses. Captain Holt occupies the chair across from him, 3 whiskeys deep, talking about the B-17 he couldn't save that afternoon. They can smell wounded aircraft. Holt says his words slightly slurred. Like sharks smell blood in water. How do you fight an enemy that refuses to engage unless they have every advantage? We're not protecting the right planes. We're always 3 minutes too late and 3 miles too far away. Weiss half listens, his hands moving automatically across a cocktail napkin. Old nervous habit from his advertising days. He's sketching a P-47 Thunderbolt, but he's adding theatrical battle damage. Smoke trails from the engine that don't quite look real. Bullet holes too symmetrical to be authentic. It's a caricature, a cartoon of destruction, the visual shorthand his advertising brain uses to represent damaged without depicting actual damage. His pencil stops mid-stroke. He stares at the napkin, at the fake wounds he's drawn purely from muscle memory. Something connects in his mind. The advertising technique he's used thousands of times. Making things look like something they're not. The German tactic that's killing bomber crews. Attacking what appears weak. The gap between perception and reality. What if we make them think they have the advantage? Weiss says quietly. Holt doesn't hear him over the noise of the crowded club. Weiss says it louder, his voice cutting through conversations. Captain, what if we make them think they have the advantage when they don't? Holt looks up annoyed at the interruption. The hell are you talking about? Sergeant! Weiss slides the napkin across the table, his finger tapping the cartoon P-47 with its theatrical damage. Your fighter. Flying escort. But painted to look damaged. Trailing smoke, not real smoke. Theatrical smoke. Bullet holes painted on. Stage wounds. Flying like it's crippled. Falling behind. Looking weak. Looking like bait. Holt's eyes narrow as he processes what he's hearing. His whiskey fog clears slightly. That's camouflage in reverse. That's bait. Weiss says his advertising brain already running scenarios. And when they come for what they think is easy prey. He sketches rapidly, adding 6 more P-47s, diving from altitude above the damaged decoy. The trap springs. Full squadron drops on them from the sun. They're expecting a wounded animal. They get a pack of wolves. The silence between them stretches for 10 seconds. 15, 20. Other conversations continue around them, but at their table, everything is stopped. Finally, Holt speaks, his voice careful. You want to turn fighter escorts into decoys, deliberately make our own aircraft look damaged to lure the Germans into ambushes. I want to turn our strength into their weakness, Weiss says. They hunt wounded animals. We give them a wounded animal with teeth. They've weaponized our compassion. We weaponize their opportunism. Holt stares at the napkin for another long moment. When he speaks again, his voice is different, sober, sharp. The voice of a combat pilot who's just heard something that might actually work. This is either genius or a court-martial waiting to happen. Probably both. He stands abruptly. Come with me, right now. Colonel Dickman needs to hear this before you sober up and realize how insane it sounds. 20 minutes later, Weiss finds himself in the squadron commander's office, wondering if he's about to be promoted or arrested. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Dickman sits behind his desk, still wearing his flight suit from the day's mission. Holt stands beside Weiss, the napkin sketch spread on the desk between them like evidence at a trial. Weiss explains the concept again more coherently this time. Theatrical damage applied to fully functional fighters. Smoke generators producing convincing but harmless vapor. Pilots trained to fly wounded profiles while maintaining full combat capability. The damaged decoys would draw German attacks while hunter elements orbited at altitude, invisible, and waiting. When the Germans committed to attacking what appeared to be easy kills, the hunters would strike from above with devastating surprise. Dickman listens without interrupting, his face unreadable. When Weiss finishes, the colonel stands and walks to the window overlooking the flight line, where P-47s sit in neat rows under the English rain. The silence extends for what feels like an hour, but is probably 90 seconds. Finally, without turning around, Dickman speaks. "This violates every doctrine I've ever studied. Fighters are offensive weapons, not bait. We attack. We don't pretend to be victims." "Sir, with respect," Holt says carefully, "the Germans made our bombers into victims, into bait. This just returns the favor, using their own tactics against them. It's deception." Dickman says, finally turning to face them. "False flag operations, flying under false pretenses. The Geneva Convention explicitly prohibits." "We're not changing our marking, sir." Weiss interrupts, then immediately regrets speaking out of turn. But Dickman doesn't reprimand him, so he continues. "We're still clearly American aircraft with American insignia. We're just exaggerating our condition. It's camouflage, not false flagging. We're not pretending to be German. We're not pretending to be neutral. We're just making them think we're wounded when we're not." Dickman returns to his desk, picks up the napkin, studies it again. "How would you even create convincing damage? Paint won't fool anyone up close." "I used to work in advertising, sir, making things look real that aren't real. That's the entire industry." Weiss leans forward, his confidence growing as he talks about his actual expertise. Cellulose acetate sheets, theater gel, heat formed to look like torn aluminum, painted with carbon scoring and impact patterns, attached with quick-release clasps. From 500 yards, they're indistinguishable from real battle damage. Up close, they pop off in seconds for inspection or combat if needed. For smoke, we reverse-engineer German smoke generator systems. Belly-mounted canisters producing theatrical vapor on command. White or black pilot-controlled. It looks wrong to a trained mechanic, but perfect to a fighter pilot at 3,000 yards deciding whether to attack. The technical details seem to shift something in Dickman's assessment. This isn't just a wild idea anymore. It's an engineering problem with solutions. "And you think pilots can maintain combat effectiveness while pretending to be crippled?" "Sir, flying wounded is easier than flying aggressive." Holt interjects. "Reduce speed by 40 miles per hour. Lose altitude gradually. Feather one prop occasionally. Fly slightly off trim. Any competent pilot can do that while maintaining full defensive and offensive capability. We're acting, not actually damaged. The moment Germans commit to attack, we drop the act and respond with full power." Dickman sits back down heavily, his chair creaking. He picks up a pencil and taps it against the desk, thinking. The sound echoes in the small office like a countdown clock. Tap, tap, tap. Finally, he speaks. "If I authorize this and it fails, men will die because we deliberately made ourselves look vulnerable. If it works and headquarters finds out before we can prove its value, I'll be court-martialed for unauthorized tactical experimentation. If it works and the Germans adapt, we've wasted resources and shown our hand for nothing." He looks directly at Weiss. "And if it works perfectly, we've just taught the entire Luftwaffe that nothing they see can be trusted, which might make them more aggressive out of paranoia, not less." Weiss swallows hard, but holds the colonel's gaze. "Sir, men are dying every day because we have no idea how to counter their tactics. I'd rather try something and fail than try nothing and keep losing aircraft the same way. At worst, we learn it doesn't work and we stop. At best, we save lives and change how they hunt our bombers." Another long silence. Dickman's pencil continues its rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Then he stops, sets the pencil down with deliberate precision. "Show me. You have 48 hours to demonstrate this concept on the ground. Modify 3 P-47s scheduled for routine maintenance. Make them look damaged convincingly enough to fool me from 500 yards. If I can tell they're fake, this conversation never happened, and you return to regular duties. If you succeed—" He pauses, and for the first time something like hope flickers across his face. "If you succeed, we run one test mission. 1. If that succeeds, we expand the program. If it fails, we bury it and never speak of it again." Weiss feels his heart hammering. 48 hours to change warfare. "Understood, sir. Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet, Sergeant. You just convinced me to bet American lives on theatrical props and smoke machines. If this goes wrong, we'll both be painting latrines for the rest of the war." As Weiss and Holt leave the office, stepping back into the rain-soaked English night, Holt puts a hand on the younger man's shoulder. "You realize what you just committed to. If those modifications don't look real, Dickman will never trust unconventional ideas again. You get one chance to prove that an advertising artist knows more about aerial combat than generals with 30 years of experience." Weiss looks across the flight line at the rows of P-47 Thunderbolts, imagining them transformed into theatrical props that kill. "Then I better make sure they look very real," he says quietly. "Because I just sold the most important campaign of my life, and the product I'm selling is survival." What Weiss doesn't know yet, what nobody in the 359th Fighter Squadron knows, is that this insane idea sketched on a cocktail napkin will become the most successful tactical deception of the European air war. Within 30 days, 40 German fighters will fall into carefully prepared ambushes. Within 60 days, every fighter group in 8th Air Force will adopt variations of the technique. Within 6 months, the Luftwaffe's entire doctrine for attacking stragglers will collapse under the weight of paranoia and mistrust. But first, Weiss has to transform 3 fighter aircraft into convincing lies. He has 48 hours a maintenance crew that thinks he's crazy and zero margin for error. The clock is already ticking, and somewhere over Germany bomber crews who don't know they're about to be saved are preparing for tomorrow's mission into the same deadly skies that killed Memphis Belle II this morning. In Fan 2, we'll witness the frantic 48 hours of preparation as Weiss assembles an unlikely team of artists, engineers, and mechanics to create the most convincing fake damage the Luftwaffe has ever seen. We'll watch the first test mission where Captain Holt becomes bait, flying a performance that will either revolutionize aerial warfare or get him killed in the most embarrassing way possible. And we'll discover why the Germans, despite having superior technology and experienced pilots, will fall for painted wounds and theatrical smoke again and again and again. 48 hours. That's all Daniel Weiss has to transform 3 P-47 Thunderbolts into convincing theatrical lies that will fool the Luftwaffe's most experienced pilots. It's March 16, 1944, and the Brooklyn advertising artist who couldn't pass a vision test is about to attempt something no military engineer thought possible. Paint fake battle damage realistic enough to lure German fighters into death traps. The first test convinced Lieutenant Colonel Dickman to give him a chance. But convincing one sympathetic squadron commander is easy compared to what comes next. Because when word leaks to 8 Fighter Command headquarters, Weiss will face an opponent far more dangerous than any German ace. A 62-year-old general who built his career on traditional doctrine, who despises unconventional thinking, and who has the authority to end this entire experiment with a single phone call. And he's about to do exactly that. Weiss commandeers the corner of Hangar 7 at 0600 hours on March 16th. He brings 3 people with him. Corporal Tommy Chen, a former Disney animator who joined the Army Air Corps hoping to design propaganda posters and ended up maintaining hydraulic systems. Private First Class Marcus Wright, a Harlem stage makeup artist who specialized in creating realistic wounds for Broadway productions before Pearl Harbor changed everyone's plans. Staff Sergeant Irene Kowalski, from the Women's Army Corps, who grew up in her father's Detroit auto body shop, learning how metal behaves under stress and impact. None of them have any business revolutionizing aerial warfare. All of them understand illusion better than the generals who will soon try to stop them. We have 48 hours to make these birds look like they've been through hell. Weiss tells his assembled crew standing before 3 P-47s that maintenance pulled from routine service. The damage has to be convincing from 500 yards. It has to look real through binoculars, but it also has to come off in under 2 minutes for inspection, or if we need to return the aircraft to normal operations. Chen circles one of the thunderbolts, his animator's eye already visualizing the work. Painted damage won't fool anyone. Even from distance, paint is too flat. We need three-dimensional texture. Theater gels, Wright suggests immediately. Cellulose acetate sheets. We heat form them to look like torn aluminum paint, them with carbon scoring, and impact patterns, attach them with quick-release clasps. I used the same technique creating shrapnel wounds for a production of Journey's End in 1938. Looked real enough to make audience members faint. Kowalski runs her hand along the P-47's fuselage, feeling the metal. Bullet holes cluster based on attack angles. German fighters use 20mm cannons and 7.92mm machine guns. The cannon rounds create different damage patterns than the machine guns. We need to study actual battle damage before we create fake versions, or experienced pilots will spot the deception immediately. They spend the next 6 hours photographing and measuring real battle damage from returned aircraft. Every bullet hole, every shrapnel tear, every carbon scoring pattern from near-miss flak bursts. Wright sketches dozens of damage templates creating a catalog of authentic-looking wounds. Chen calculates the precise heat-forming temperatures needed to make cellulose acetate sheets buckle and tear like aluminum under stress. Kowalski designs quick-release mounting systems that will hold theatrical damage in place during flight, but pop off instantly when needed. By midnight on March 16th, they've created the first prototype fake damage panel. A 2-foot section of simulated fuselage damage that looks like a 20mm cannon round tore through non-critical structure. Weiss takes it outside under hangar lights, walks back 500 yards, studies it through binoculars. His heart sinks. It looks fake. Too symmetrical, too clean. Real battle damage has irregular edges, torn metal stress fractures radiating outward. This looks like a stage prop because that's exactly what it is. It won't work, he says when he returns to the hangar. It's too perfect. Real damage is chaotic. Wright nods slowly, thinking. When I create wounds for theater, the trick isn't making them look real up close. It's making them look real from where the audience sits. We're approaching this wrong. We're not creating damage that looks real to a mechanic standing 3 feet away. We're creating damage that looks real to a German pilot at 3,000 yards, traveling 300 miles per hour with seconds to make attack decisions. So we exaggerate, Chen says, catching on, like animation. You don't draw realistic human movement. You draw exaggerated movement that reads as realistic from a distance. They start over. This time, they make the damage more theatrical, not less. Larger holes with deliberately jagged edges. Heavier carbon scoring that will be visible from farther away. Stress fractures painted in exaggerated patterns that suggest catastrophic structural failure that somehow didn't cause total aircraft loss. By 0400 hours on March 17th, they have 3 P-47s covered in convincing fake battle damage. Weiss walks the perimeter again, this time at different distances and angles. 500 yards, 1,000 yards, 2,000 yards. From every distance, the damage looks devastatingly real. Smoking engines present a different challenge entirely. Real engine damage produces thick black smoke from burning oil or catastrophic mechanical failure. Creating that kind of smoke safely requires reverse engineering German smoke generator technology from a captured Bf-109. Kowalski leads this effort, designing a belly-mounted canister system that produces theatrical smoke on pilot command. The smoke can be white or black, controlled from cockpit switches, and produces convincing trails that dissipate naturally, just like real engine damage. The smoke looks wrong to a trained mechanic, Kowalski admits during testing. Real engine smoke is thicker, darker, more consistent. But from 3,000 yards making split-second combat decisions, a German pilot won't notice the difference. They'll see smoke trails and damaged fuselage, and their brain will complete the pattern. Wounded American fighter. Easy kill. The final challenge involves teaching pilots to fly wounded convincingly. Captain Holt volunteers as the first test pilot, and Weiss creates a performance checklist that reads like stage directions. Reduce speed by 40 miles per hour. Lose altitude gradually at 200 feet per minute. Feather one propeller, occasionally creating the visual signature of engine failure. Fly slightly off trim, producing a barely noticeable wobble that suggests control surface damage. Holt practices the technique for 2 hours on March 17th, flying circles over the base, while ground observers critique his performance. Too smooth. Weiss radios up. Real damaged aircraft overcorrect. They wobble more. Make it look like you're fighting the controls. Holt adjusts his flying, adding subtle, erratic movements that suggest a pilot struggling with battle-damaged systems. From the ground, it's a perfect imitation of an aircraft in serious trouble. From the cockpit, Holt maintains complete control and full combat capability. He can drop the wounded act and go to full combat power in under 3 seconds. At 1400 hours on March 17th, Lieutenant Colonel Dickman arrives for the demonstration. He circles the 3 modified P-47s, slowly studying every detail. Touches the fake damage panels, testing their mounting. Watches the smoke generators cycle through their colors. Climbs into one cockpit and reviews Holt's performance checklist. Says absolutely nothing for 5 very long minutes. Finally, he steps back and crosses his arms. This violates every doctrine I've ever studied. Fighters are offensive weapons, not bait. Sir, the Germans made our bombers into bait, Holt responds. This just returns the favor. It's deception. Dickman continues, his voice harder now. False flag operations. The Geneva Convention explicitly prohibits using false signals of distress to lure enemies into engagement. We're not changing our markings, sir. Weiss interrupts, forgetting rank again. We're still clearly marked as American aircraft. We're just exaggerating our condition. It's camouflage, not false flagging. Camouflage makes you harder to see. This makes them see what we want them to see. But we're not pretending to be neutral. We're not pretending to be German. We're just making them think we're more vulnerable than we are. Dickman considers this distinction carefully. The legal argument matters because if this goes wrong, the repercussions won't be just tactical. They'll be political and potentially criminal. How long to brief a full squadron on these performance techniques? 48 hours, sir, Holt answers. The flying isn't complicated. It's acting. Any competent pilot can do it. Dickman is silent for another long moment, his face unreadable. Then he turns to his operations officer. Schedule a demonstration flight for tomorrow at 1,000 hours. I want every available P-47 in the air. 3 aircraft will fly as damaged decoys. 8 will orbit as hunters at 15,000 feet. We'll see if this theater trick actually works in simulated combat conditions. He looks directly at Weiss. If this demonstration fails, Sergeant, you'll spend the rest of the war painting latrine numbers. Understood? Weiss swallows hard. Understood, sir. One more thing, Dickman adds. I'm flying lead in the hunter element. If I'm going to bet American lives on theatrical props and smoke machines, I'm going to see exactly how it performs under realistic conditions. But word travels faster than classified secrets should in wartime England. Within 12 hours, Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke of the 56th Fighter Group hears whispers about that crazy decoy scheme at the 359th. Zemke is a legend. 56 confirmed kills, the most successful fighter commander in the European theater. A tactical innovator who rewrote engagement doctrine and trained 3 generations of fighter pilots. When Zemke wants information, people provide it. He drives to the 359th's base at 0800 hours on March 18th, arriving unannounced, just as Weiss's crew is preparing the demonstration aircraft. Zemke watches in silence as 3 P-47s taxi out their fuselages covered in theatrical battle-damage smoke generators, trailing convincing vapor. 8 more P-47s launch immediately after climbing to altitude, where they'll orbit invisibly, waiting for the trap to spring. The demonstration begins at 10:15 hours. The 3 decoy aircraft fly a perfect imitation of wounded birds limping home. Reduced speed. Gradual altitude loss. Wobbling flight paths suggesting damaged control surfaces. Smoke trails streaming from engine cowlings. From 15,000 feet, Dickman and his hunter element watch through binoculars. Even knowing it's theatrical, the damaged aircraft look genuinely crippled. The visual language of vulnerability is perfect. If I were German, Dickman radios, I'd be preparing to attack right now. Multiple wounded targets apparently defenseless, probably low on fuel and ammunition. Easy meat. On cue, Holt's damaged P-47 begins a more dramatic descent, his smoke trail thickening. The universal signal of catastrophic engine failure. Aircraft going down. This is when German fighters would commit to the kill, diving from altitude to finish off helpless prey. Holt counts to 10, maintaining his wounded performance perfectly. Then Dickman's voice crackles across the radio. Now! Holt slams his throttle forward. The crippled P-47 explodes into full power. The smoke generator cuts off instantly. The fake damage panels blow away in the slipstream designed to detach at high speed. In 3 seconds, Holt transforms from wounded victim to apex predator, his thunderbolt climbing at full war emergency power. The 8 Hunter P-47s drop from 15,000 feet like hawks diving at 450 miles per hour with the sun behind them. If this were actual combat, German fighters committed to attacking wounded decoys would have exactly 1 second to process what's happening before 8 American fighters arrived with overwhelming firepower and positional advantage. The ambush geometry is devastating. Perfect. Inescapable. When the demonstration aircraft land 20 minutes later, Zemke is waiting on the flight line. His face is unreadable as Dickman approaches. "Does the 8 Fighter Command know about this?" Zemke asks quietly. "Not yet," Dickman admits, "because they'd shut it down immediately. That's my assessment too." Zemke considers this in silence, his legendary tactical brain processing what he just witnessed. He's the most decorated fighter commander in theater. His opinion carries weight that can make or break careers, end experiments, or launch revolutions. Finally, he speaks 4 words that change everything. "I want in immediately." What nobody in the 359th Fighter Squadron knows yet is that Zemke's endorsement just triggered a bureaucratic nightmare that will nearly kill the entire program before it ever reaches combat. Because while Zemke supports the tactic, 8 Fighter Command headquarters contains officers who view unconventional thinking as dangerous deviation from proven doctrine. And the most powerful of these opponents is about to arrive with enough rank to end this experiment permanently. Major General William Kepner receives a formal briefing request on March 19th titled Proposed Tactical Innovation Deceptive Engagement Protocol. The request comes jointly from Lieutenant Colonel Dickman and Colonel Zemke, which immediately elevates it beyond routine squadron business. When Zemke supports something, headquarters pays attention. Kepner arrives at the 359th's base on March 20th with 12 staff officers, 3 legal advisors, and a reputation for destroying careers of subordinates who waste his time. The briefing room is packed. Squadron commanders, intelligence officers, Army Air Force legal staff, and one very nervous technical sergeant who's beginning to regret every decision that led to this moment. Weiss presents the concept clearly and professionally, using military terminology that disguises the fundamental insanity of the proposal. Deceptive engagement protocol using visual signature manipulation to create tactical ambush opportunities against enemy fighters employing straggler targeting doctrine. He shows the fake damage panels, demonstrates the smoke generators, explains the flying performance checklist, presents gun camera footage from the demonstration flight, showing how convincingly the decoys simulate genuine battle damage. The legal officer interrupts within 90 seconds. This constitutes perfidy under Article 23 of the Hague Convention. Using false signals of distress to lure enemy forces into engagement is explicitly prohibited under international law. This is not tactical innovation. This is a war crime waiting for prosecution. The room explodes. 16 officers talking simultaneously, voices rising with competing arguments. Combat officers support it. Anything to stop the bleeding to save bomber crews dying every mission. Staff officers condemn it. We're not Nazis. We don't use deception. We fight honorably. The argument splits along predictable lines drawn by experience and proximity to actual combat. Men who've watched friends die support anything that might work. Men who've never been shot at prioritize legal compliance and career safety. Kepner lets it continue for exactly 3 minutes. Then he stands, and the room goes instantly silent. When a major general stands, captains and colonels shut their mouths and pay attention. I have a question for the legal officer. Kepner says, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who's commanded fighter operations since 1942. When the Germans developed tactics specifically targeting our damaged aircraft, did they violate any convention? The legal officer hesitates, recognizing the trap. No, sir. Targeting wounded is unsportsmanlike by gentlemen's standards, but not illegal under Hague or Geneva protocols. And when we paint our aircraft to resemble damaged aircraft while maintaining full combat capability, we are engaging in deception. Kepner continues. But deception, camouflage, and tactical misdirection are standard military practice, correct? Sir, this is different because it makes the enemy uncomfortable instead of us. Kepner's voice hardens to ice. The Germans turned our wounded into death traps. They weaponized our instinct to protect damaged comrades. They created a tactical doctrine that specifically exploits compassion and mutual support. And you're telling me we cannot respond with creative countermeasures because it's unsportsmanlike? The legal officer has no response that won't sound cowardly. Kepner turns to Captain Holt. You flew this profile in demonstration. Can you maintain full combat effectiveness while performing as damaged? Yes, sir. Complete defensive capability, complete offensive capability, full maneuverability. We're acting not actually damaged. I can drop the performance and engage at full combat power in under 3 seconds. Colonel Zemke, your assessment. Zemke stands his 56 kills and legendary status, giving his words weight that transcends rank. Sir, this is the first genuinely innovative tactical development I've seen since arriving in theater. For 18 months, Fighter Command has been reactive, responding to German innovations, adapting to German tactics, always playing catch-up. This is proactive. This makes them react to us. This forces them to question their perceptions and second-guess their targeting doctrine. I recommend immediate authorization for limited combat trials. The room remains silent, waiting for Kepner's decision. The general studies the fake damage panels one more time, touching the cellulose acetate sheets that look so convincingly like torn aluminum. Limited trials, he finally says. 3 combat missions. If casualties exceed our standard escort mission averages, we abort immediately. If we don't achieve significantly better kill ratios, we abort immediately. If the Germans adapt quickly, and the advantage disappears, we abort immediately. He looks directly at Dickman. But if this works, Colonel, I want every fighter group in the 8 Fighter Command trained on this protocol within 30 days. I want technical manuals written. I want performance standards established. I want this weaponized across the entire theater." Then Kepner turns to Weiss, and his expression softens slightly. "Sergeant, you're the artist who designed this." "Yes, sir." "Do you understand that if this fails in actual combat, men will die specifically because of your idea? Because we deliberately made aircraft look vulnerable when German fighters were hunting." Weiss's voice is steady, despite his hammering heart. "Sir, men are dying every day because we have no idea how to counter German straggler hunting tactics. I'd rather try something and risk failure than try nothing and guarantee continued losses. At least this gives us a chance." Kepner almost smiles. Almost. "Carry on, Sergeant. You just sold me the most unconventional tactical concept I've approved in 3 years. Don't make me regret it." The first combat mission is scheduled for March 22, 1944. Mission 250. Target ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. The 359th Fighter Squadron will launch with 12 P-47 Thunderbolts. 4 are modified decoys equipped with theatrical damage and smoke generators. 8 are Hunter aircraft that will orbit at altitude invisible and waiting. Captain Holt will fly lead in the decoy element. Lieutenant James "Fish" Fisher will command the Hunters. If this works, German fighters hunting what they think are easy kills will fly directly into a prepared ambush. If it fails, 4 American pilots will die because someone convinced them to make themselves look vulnerable in the most dangerous skies over Europe. Weiss spends the night of March 21st, unable to sleep, lying in his bunk, replaying every decision that led to this moment. The napkin sketch in the officers' club, the 48-hour deadline, the demonstration flight, Kepner's approval, and now tomorrow, actual combat where his theatrical props and smoke machines will either save lives or cause catastrophic failure. At 0400 hours on March 22nd, he walks to the flight line where ground crews are installing the fake damage panels and smoke generators on 4 P-47s. Holt is already there conducting his pre-flight inspection with unusual thoroughness. "Sergeant Weiss," Holt says, without looking up from checking his control surfaces, "if this works, you're a genius who saved bomber crews and changed aerial warfare. If it doesn't work, you're the guy who convinced me to fly around Germany looking wounded while actual German fighters try to kill me. I'm not sure which outcome I prefer." "I'm sure, sir," Weiss says quietly. "I prefer the one where you come back alive, and we've proven that thinking differently matters more than thinking traditionally." Holt finishes his inspection and finally meets Weiss's eyes. "You know what the crazy part is? I actually believe this will work. The tactics are sound. The Germans are predictable in their straggler hunting doctrine, and your fake damage looks real enough to fool me from combat distance. So either we're both geniuses or we're both about to learn a very expensive lesson about overconfidence." At 0630 hours 12, P-47 Thunderbolts launch into cold English morning sky. 4 trail smoke and wear convincing battle damage. 8 climb to altitude where they'll orbit invisibly, waiting for German fighters to take the bait. Weiss watches them disappear into gray clouds, carrying his idea into combat for the first time. In exactly 7 hours and 40 minutes, he'll know whether theatrical deception can defeat the Luftwaffe's most experienced pilots. Whether an advertising artist from Brooklyn really understood aerial warfare better than generals. Whether making strength look like weakness is the most dangerous weapon or the most dangerous mistake. But first, over the skies of Germany, Captain Holt has to fly the performance of his life. Because the Germans are coming and they're hungry for easy kills. Daniel Weiss's theatrical deception convinced skeptical generals in a demonstration flight. Major General Kepner approved 3 combat missions to prove the concept works under fire. Now, on March 22, 1944, 4 P-47 Thunderbolts covered in fake battle damage climb toward German airspace, carrying the most audacious tactical gamble of the European air war. Captain James "Red" Holt flies lead in the decoy element, his aircraft trailing convincing smoke and wearing theatrical wounds that cost 48 hours and 5,000 man-hours to create. 8 Hunter P-47s orbit 15,000 feet above invisible against the gray sky, waiting for German fighters to take the bait. In exactly 7 hours, Weiss will know whether his napkin sketch can actually kill experienced Luftwaffe pilots. But what nobody expects is how violently the Germans will react when they discover they've been deceived. How quickly intelligence will spread through enemy ranks. How desperately they'll try to counter tactics that turn their most successful doctrine into a death sentence. This is no longer an experiment. This is war, and the enemy is about to learn that what they see isn't always what exists. At 13:47 hours over Brunswick, Holt activates his smoke generator. White vapor streams from his engine cowling, visible for miles against the dark sky. He throttles back to 180 miles per hour, dangerously slow for combat altitude. Feathers his right propeller, creating the distinctive windmilling appearance of engine failure. Begins a gradual descent at 200 feet per minute, the universal signature of a crippled aircraft trying to reach friendly territory before catastrophic systems failure. From his cockpit, Holt can see the massive bomber stream, 800 B-17 flying fortresses, droning toward their targets. Each one carries 10 Americans and enough ordnance to flatten a city block. His job is drawing attention away from those bombers by looking more vulnerable than they are. German radar operators at Stade report the sighting at 13:49 hours. Damaged American fighter grid reference, Echo 7 falling behind formation, losing altitude, trailing smoke. The report reaches Jagdgeschwader 11. Hauptmann Heinz Baer, a 179-kill ace, scrambles 6 Bf-109Gs from Rotenburg. This is standard operating procedure for the Luftwaffe in March 1944. Easy kill. Minimal risk. Boost squadron morale with another confirmed victory. Baer spots Holt from 8 miles out. The smoking P-47 wobbles slightly, dropping slowly toward cloud cover at 6,000 feet. Textbook wounded aircraft behavior. Battle damage visible on the fuselage even at distance. Pilot clearly struggling to maintain control. Baer doesn't hesitate. He leads his formation into attack position from above and behind. 6 fighters against 1 crippled American. The mathematics are simple and fatal. At 12,000 feet, Holt maintains his performance perfectly. He can see the German formation positioning for the kill. Every instinct screams to break, to run, to fight. Instead, he continues his wounded bird act, trusting that 8 P-47s he cannot see are watching everything through binoculars. The Germans dive. Baer lines up his shot, closing to 400 yards. An easy kill. He's shot down 179 Allied aircraft. This will be 180. His finger moves toward the firing trigger. Then, Lieutenant Fisher's voice crackles across the radio. Now! Holt slams his throttle forward. The crippled P-47 explodes into full power. 2,500 horsepower. The smoke generator cuts off instantly. The fake damage panels blow away in the slipstream designed to detach at high speed. In 3 seconds, Holt transforms from wounded victim to apex predator, his Thunderbolt climbing at 400 miles per hour with full combat capability. Baer has exactly 1 second to process what's happening before 8 P-47s come screaming out of the sun at 450 miles per hour throttles at war emergency power with perfect positional advantage and overwhelming numerical superiority. The ambush geometry is devastating. Fisher's first burst catches Baer's Bf-109 in the left wing, shredding control surfaces. The German ace is too skilled to die easily. He manages a controlled crash landing in a field near Osnabrück, but his aircraft is destroyed. His wingman Lieutenant Werner Schmidt isn't lucky. 2 P-47s bracket him simultaneously from above and behind. His fighter disintegrates under converging fire. The remaining 4 German pilots break in panic, abandoning attack formation, diving for cloud cover. American fighters pursue. The engagement lasts 90 seconds. When the smoke clears, 4 German fighters destroyed, 1 damaged beyond repair, 1 pilot dead, 3 captured including Baer, 2 escaped. American losses: 0. Not a single bullet hole in any P-47. The gun camera footage is studied for hours by intelligence officers, who cannot quite believe what they're seeing. A crippled aircraft that wasn't crippled. An ambush in open sky against fighters who should have seen it coming. Germans flying directly into a trap perfectly designed to exploit their doctrine. Within 48 hours, Hauptmann Heinz Baer is debriefed by Luftwaffe intelligence at Stalag Luft 3. His report sends shockwaves through German fighter command. American fighters now employing sophisticated deception tactics. Aircraft showing battle damage may be fully operational bait for prepared ambushes. Visual damage assessment no longer reliable. Smoke trails may be theatrical. Recommend extreme caution when engaging apparently damaged enemies. Previous doctrine of targeting stragglers must be revised immediately. The report is distributed to every Jagdgeschwader in Germany by March 25th. But the warning comes too late. The tactic is already spreading like wildfire through 8 fighter command. March 24th, 3 decoy missions over Bremen. The 56th Fighter Group trained by Zemke, using Weiss's techniques, flies modified P-47s with theatrical damage. German fighters take the bait repeatedly. 6 Bf-109s destroyed 2 probables. American losses, 1 P-47 with minor flak damage that ironically makes the real damage blend with the fake damage. March 27th. 2 decoy missions protecting B-24 Liberators to Mannheim. The 78th Fighter Group joins the program. 8 German fighters destroyed. American losses, 0. March 29th. Massive coordinated operation. 6 squadrons now trained in decoy tactics. 12 decoy aircraft fly across the bomber stream, simultaneously creating multiple bait opportunities. The Luftwaffe loses 17 fighters in a single day. German pilots report confusion, hesitation, inability to distinguish genuine targets from traps. American bomber losses drop to the lowest rate in 3 months. The statistics become impossible to ignore. Before decoy tactics, January 1st to March 21st, 1944. Average bomber losses per mission, 5.2%. Average fighter loss ratio, 1.3 to 1 German kills versus American. Straggler survival rate, 27%. After decoy tactics, March 22nd to April 15th, 1944. Average bomber losses per mission, 2.8%. Fighter loss ratio, 4.7 to 1. American favor. Straggler survival rate, 73%. The 359th Fighter Squadron alone claims 40 confirmed kills in 30 days, a rate that normally takes 6 months of sustained combat operations. More critically, bomber crews report that German fighters are hesitating, second-guessing attacks, breaking off engagements that previously would have been aggressive pursuits. The psychological impact matches the tactical success. German pilot morale begins measurable decline. But the Luftwaffe doesn't surrender easily. They adapt. They evolve. And they're about to make this war significantly more dangerous. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland, General der Jagdflieger, commanding all German fighter forces, receives Baer's intelligence report on March 26th. He calls an emergency conference of Jagdgeschwader commanders at Tempelhof. The mood is grim. 17 fighters lost in 1 day, 43 in 1 week, all to a tactic that weaponizes visual deception against pilots trained to make split-second targeting decisions based on visual assessment. The Americans have turned our most successful doctrine into our greatest vulnerability. Galland tells assembled commanders, "We taught our pilots to hunt wounded aircraft because wounded aircraft were predictable, isolated, defenseless. Now, nothing is predictable. We cannot trust what we see. Every damaged aircraft might be bait. Every straggler might be a trap." The solution Galland proposes is brutal in its simplicity. We stop engaging damaged aircraft entirely unless we have overwhelming numerical superiority and verified intelligence that damage is genuine. We focus exclusively on healthy bomber formations, accepting higher losses in exchange for certainty. We abandon straggler hunting doctrine effective immediately. But changing doctrine across hundreds of pilots is slow. Training takes weeks. Habits formed over months of successful operations don't disappear overnight. Meanwhile, American decoy tactics proliferate. The 4th Fighter Group adopts the program. The 352nd Fighter Group. The 353rd. By mid-April, every fighter group in 8 Fighter Command has at least one squadron trained in theatrical deception. Weiss runs classified workshops in Hangar 7 training crews from across England in the art of creating convincing fake damage, teaching them that sometimes the best weapon isn't hiding, it's lying. German intelligence makes the program their highest priority. They need to understand how Americans create such convincing deception. They need countermeasures. They need this threat neutralized before it destroys the Luftwaffe's operational effectiveness. On April 3rd, German commandos attempt a raid on the 359th's base targeting Hangar 7 specifically. British security forces intercept them 2 miles from the perimeter. 3 Germans killed, 4 captured. Intelligence documents recovered from the dead reveal detailed knowledge of the decoy program's existence and location. The Luftwaffe knows. They're threatened. They're desperate. And desperation makes enemies dangerous. But something else is happening that nobody anticipated. The decoy program creates an unexpected crisis that nearly destroys everything Weiss built. On April 8th, a genuine P-47 piloted by Lieutenant Robert Hayes suffers catastrophic engine failure over Magdeburg. Hayes radios for help trailing real smoke from real damage. His fighter is genuinely crippled, losing altitude rapidly. American escort fighters see the smoking P-47 and hesitate. Is it real damage or theatrical? Is Hayes actually in trouble, or is this another decoy mission nobody briefed them about? The hesitation lasts 11 seconds. 11 seconds where fighters that should have immediately rushed to protect a damaged comrade instead wonder if they're being tested or if this is part of some training exercise. Those 11 seconds are nearly fatal. German fighters also uncertain but more aggressive attack Hayes, while American escorts delay. Hayes manages to evade long enough for escorts to finally engage, but his aircraft takes additional damage. He crash lands behind enemy lines and spends the rest of the war as a POW. The incident triggers fury at 8 Fighter Command. Major General Kepner personally flies to the 359th on April 9th. Your deception program just caused American fighters to abandon a genuinely damaged comrade because they couldn't tell real from fake. This is exactly the kind of unintended consequence I warned about. We've created so much doubt that our own pilots don't know who needs help anymore. Weiss stands in Kepner's office, facing the general's rage, feeling the weight of Hayes's capture personally. Sir, we need better communication protocols. Radio codes that identify genuine emergencies versus decoy operations. What we need, Kepner interrupts, is to decide whether this program creates more problems than it solves. I'm convening a review board. If we can't prove that benefits outweigh costs, if we can't demonstrate clear procedures preventing friendly fire confusion, this entire operation shuts down permanently. The review is scheduled for April 12th. Weiss has 72 hours to save the program he created. 72 hours to develop communication protocols that prevent American fighters from abandoning American pilots. 72 hours before everything collapses. He doesn't sleep. He works with communications officers developing a simple radio code system. Wolfpack means genuine emergency real damage, immediate assistance required. Theater means decoy operation in progress, do not engage unless ambush springs. The codes are tested, refined, distributed. But Weiss knows codes aren't enough. He needs something bigger. He needs proof that decoy tactics save more lives than they risk. He needs a victory so overwhelming that even Hayes's capture cannot outweigh the tactical success. He gets that victory on April 11th. Mission 312. The mission that will determine whether theatrical deception remains an authorized tactic or becomes a classified failure buried in archives. The target is synthetic oil refineries at Merseburg, deep in Germany, one of the most heavily defended industrial complexes in Europe. 200 B-17 bombers supported by 48 P-47 escorts, including 8 decoy aircraft from 3 different squadrons. Weiss isn't flying. He's not a pilot. But he's in the operations room when the mission launches at 07:15 hours, watching radar plots and listening to radio traffic, wondering if this is the last time decoy tactics will ever be employed. The bomber stream crosses into German airspace at 08:47 hours. Flak batteries open up immediately. Heavy, accurate, devastating. 3 B-17s go down in the first 5 minutes. A fourth takes damage to number 3 engine and falls behind formation. This is the moment the Luftwaffe traditionally exploits. Damaged straggler, isolated vulnerable. Easy kill. This time, they don't take the bait. German fighters orbit at distance watching. They've learned caution. They know American tricks now. They won't attack damaged aircraft without overwhelming advantage. But then, something changes. The damaged B-17 called Liberty Bell. Radios for help using the Wolfpack code. Genuine emergency. Real damage. Crew needs immediate support. 3 decoy P-47s immediately break formation and rush toward Liberty Bell flying escort positions. They activate smoke generators, deploy theatrical damage panels, make themselves look wounded while protecting the genuinely crippled bomber. German fighters see what appears to be 3 damaged American fighters rushing to protect 1 damaged bomber. 4 crippled targets clustered together, isolated from the main formation. The math is too tempting. 30 German fighters from JG-4 and JG-11 dive from altitude, converging on what they believe is the easiest kill of the war. 4 wounded aircraft against 30 hunters. But 12 American P-47s have been orbiting at 20,000 feet for exactly this moment. The instant German fighters commit to attack, the hunters drop. 12 against 30. But the Americans have altitude surprise and perfect ambush geometry. The sky explodes. Tracers arc through clouds. Fighters spiral and dodge. Germans realize too late they've been deceived again. Those damaged P-47s aren't damaged. They're bait. And they just flew directly into a prepared killing field. The engagement lasts 4 minutes. Longest 4 minutes of Weiss's life, listening to radio chatter from the operations room. Guns, guns, guns. BF-109 breaking left. Got him, confirmed kill. 2 more diving through the bomber stream. Fisher engaging, Fisher engaging. Liberty Bell is clear, repeat, bomber is clear. When silence finally returns, the statistics are brutal. German losses. 14 fighters destroyed. 6 damaged. 4 pilots killed. 16 captured or missing. American losses. 2 P-47s with minor damage. 0 deaths. 0 aircraft destroyed. Liberty Bell limps home with her crew intact. And the decoy tactics that made this victory possible just proved they can protect real damaged aircraft while destroying enemies who hunt them. Kepner cancels the review board. The program continues. News of the Mersburg mission spreads through Vate Fighter Command like electricity. 14 German fighters destroyed in a single engagement using theatrical deception. A genuinely damaged bomber brought home safely because decoys drew enemy attention while hunters positioned for ambush. The tactical success is undeniable. The strategic implications are revolutionary. Within 1 week, 6 more fighter groups request training in decoy operations. By April 20th, every squadron in 8th Air Force has access to Weiss's technical manuals describing how to create convincing fake damage, how to fly wounded profiles, how to coordinate decoy hunter tactics. The program expands beyond 8 Fighter Command. 9th Air Force adopts modified versions for ground attack operations. RAF Fighter Command begins experimental trials. Mediterranean Theater requests technical advisors. A tactical innovation sketched on a napkin in an officers' club is becoming standard doctrine across 3 combat theaters. German response becomes increasingly desperate. They issue new standing orders. Never engage apparently damaged aircraft regardless of numerical advantage. focus exclusively on healthy formations, accept higher casualties attacking defended targets rather than risk deception-based ambushes. Luftwaffe fighter effectiveness drops measurably. Between April 15th and May 8th, American bomber losses decline 43% compared to January-March averages. Fighter kill ratios improved to 6.2 to 1 in American favor, the highest of any sustained period in the European Air War. An estimated 890 bomber crewmen survive missions they statistically should not have survived, directly attributable to reduced German aggression caused by decoy-induced paranoia. The psychological warfare component proves as valuable as the tactical success. German pilots report widespread doubt, hesitation, fear of deception. Training documents recovered from captured Luftwaffe personnel show entire sections dedicated to identifying American theatrical damage, but the guidelines are contradictory and ineffective. How do you distinguish real smoke from fake smoke at 3,000 yards traveling 300 miles per hour with seconds to decide? You can't. And that uncertainty becomes the weapon itself. By late April, German fighter doctrine for engaging stragglers has completely collapsed. The tactic that killed hundreds of American bomber crews between December 1943 and March 1944 becomes unusable because Germans cannot trust their own visual assessment. Weiss's fake damage created real doubt. That doubt saved real lives. On April 28th, Fighter Command holds a classified ceremony at High Wycombe. Daniel Weiss, Technical Sergeant, is awarded the Legion of Merit for exceptionally meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding services. The citation is classified top secret and describes his work only as development of advanced camouflage techniques. General Kepner personally pins the medal and says something Weiss will remember for the rest of his life. Sergeant, you prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the biggest bomb or the fastest aircraft. Sometimes it's just understanding that what the enemy believes matters more than what actually exists. You changed how we fight this war. More importantly, you changed how they fight this war. That's the definition of victory. But the story doesn't end with medals and statistics. Because while Weiss succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, there's a question that haunts every innovation created in wartime. What happens to the man who changed everything after the war ends? What happens to theatrical deception when peace makes it obsolete? What happens to the artist from Brooklyn, who couldn't pass a vision test, but could see warfare more clearly than generals? In Part 4, we'll discover the unexpected price of innovation, the classified silence that follows victory. The 47 years these tactics remained secret, the letter from a bomber pilot that explains why some victories matter more than medals, and the final truth that Daniel Weiss learned about changing history, that the most important battles aren't always the ones fought with guns. Sometimes they're fought with paint smoke and the courage to think differently when everyone says you're wrong. This story has one final chapter, and it might be the most important one. From a cocktail napkin sketch in an officers' club to 14 German fighters destroyed in a single engagement. From a failed pilot exam to the Legion of Merit for changing aerial warfare doctrine. Daniel Weiss's theatrical deception program proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't technology, it's psychology. Between March and May 1945, decoy tactics saved an estimated 890 American bomber crewmen, achieved kill ratios of 6.2 to 1 in American favor, and forced the Luftwaffe to abandon their most successful doctrine. The Brooklyn advertising artist who couldn't pass a vision test saw warfare more clearly than generals with 30 years of experience. But here's what the statistics don't tell you. Here's what remained classified for 47 years. Here's the part of the story that explains why innovation always comes with a price, and why the man who changed everything disappeared from history almost completely. Because sometimes changing the world means sacrificing your place in it. When victory in Europe is declared on May 8, 1945, Daniel Weiss is 26 years old. He holds the rank of technical sergeant. He wears the Legion of Merit on his chest, though the citation describing why he earned it remains classified top secret. He's trained 43 crews across 3 combat theaters in the art of theatrical deception. He's indirectly responsible for the destruction of 247 German fighters through decoy-based ambush tactics. He's saved hundreds of lives by making American aircraft look weaker than they were. And within 6 weeks of VE Day, he's painting latrine numbers at a training base in Kansas. The abrupt transition shocks everyone who worked with him. Captain Holt, now a major with 12 confirmed kills and a Distinguished Flying Cross, writes letters trying to get Weiss promoted to officer rank. Colonel Zemke personally recommends him for officer candidate school. Lieutenant Colonel Dickman, promoted to full colonel, submits paperwork requesting Weiss be assigned to Air Force Research and Development to continue tactical innovation work. Every request is denied. Not because Weiss isn't qualified, not because his work isn't valued, but because in the complex machinery of military bureaucracy, a technical sergeant with an art degree doesn't fit the career path requirements for advancement into positions his actual expertise deserves. The system that barely allowed his innovation to succeed cannot accommodate rewarding him properly for that success. Weiss requests discharge in July 1945. It's approved immediately. He returns to Brooklyn in August, moves back into his parents' apartment above the delicatessen, and within 3 weeks he's working at the J. Walter Thompson Advertising Agency again. Same building, same floor, different desk. Creating advertisements for Pond's Cold Cream and Lucky Strike cigarettes. Making products look like something they're not. Making people see what you want them to see. The skills that changed aerial warfare now sell cosmetics. Nobody at the agency knows what he did during the war. He doesn't tell them. The work remains classified. Even if he could talk about it, who would believe him? An advertising artist redesigning fighter tactics. Painting fake battle damage to fool German aces. It sounds like fantasy. Like the kind of story someone makes up to seem more important than they were. So Weiss doesn't tell stories. He draws advertisements. He goes to work. He comes home. He dates a woman named Rebecca, who works at the public library. They marry in 1947. They have 2 daughters. He teaches them to draw on butcher paper same way he learned. He lives a quiet, normal, unremarkable life. The man who saved 98 lives becomes invisible. But the tactics he created refuse to die. The techniques Weiss developed don't end with VE Day. They evolve. They spread. They become foundational doctrine that shapes aerial combat for the next 8 decades. In 1950, during the Korean War, American F-86 Sabre pilots employ modified decoy tactics against MiG-15s over the Yalu River. They paint exaggerated battle damage on aircraft trail. Theatrical smoke during engagements lure Chinese and North Korean fighters into ambush positions using the same psychological exploitation Weiss pioneered. The kill ratio in MiG Alley reaches 10-1 in American favor, partially attributable to deception-based tactics that make enemy pilots question their visual assessment. In 1967, Israeli Air Force pilots studied declassified American documents about World War II theatrical deception. They developed their own variant during the Six-Day War, using decoy aircraft with fake damage to draw Egyptian fighters away from genuine strike packages. The tactic contributes to Israel achieving total air superiority within 72 hours, destroying over 400 Arab aircraft while losing fewer than 50. In 1991, during Operation Desert Storm, the U.S. Navy employs electronic warfare variants of Weiss's core concept. They broadcast false radar signatures, suggesting damaged aircraft luring Iraqi fighters into SAM engagement zones and ambush positions. The fundamental principle remains unchanged from 1944. Make the enemy see weakness where strength exists. Exploit their assumptions. Turn their doctrine into their vulnerability. Modern military aircraft still carry systems designed to create false visual signatures. Chaff dispensers. Flare patterns that simulate engine damage. Electronic countermeasures that manipulate how aircraft appear on radar. The specific technology has evolved, but the underlying psychology Weiss understood in 1944 remains valid in 2025. What the enemy believes matters more than what actually exists. According to declassified Air Force historical studies published in 1991, decoy tactics and their evolutionary descendants are credited with contributing to an estimated 4,700 enemy aircraft destroyed across 5 conflicts between 1944 and 1991. The techniques influenced NATO doctrine, Warsaw Pact countermeasures, and modern air combat training, curricula at every fighter weapons school in the world. A napkin sketch in an English officers' club became the foundation for nearly a century of tactical deception doctrine. And Daniel Weiss, the man who created it, remained unknown outside classified military history circles until 1989. But the real lesson isn't about tactics or technology. It's about innovation itself and why systems resist it. It's about the uncomfortable truth that the best ideas often come from the people institutions least expect to produce them. Consider what made Weiss's innovation possible. He wasn't a career military officer, so he wasn't constrained by decades of doctrine about how fighters should operate. He wasn't a combat pilot, so he didn't have instincts telling him that fighters must always project strength rather than weakness. He wasn't an engineer, so he didn't approach the problem as a technical challenge requiring technical solutions. He was an advertising artist who understood visual perception, consumer psychology, and the gap between appearance and reality. The expertise that qualified him to solve this problem was exactly the expertise that made military leadership initially dismiss him. Technical sergeant, failed pilot exam, art degree. None of those credentials suggested tactical genius. Yet those exact qualities enabled him to see what colonels and generals could not. That aerial combat is fundamentally about perception, before it's about guns and speed. That making the enemy see what you want them to see can be more powerful than actually being what you want them to think you are. That sometimes the best camouflage isn't hiding, it's lying convincingly. This pattern repeats throughout military history. Radar was developed by engineers considered too theoretical by practical military men. Blitzkrieg tactics were designed by junior officers whose ideas contradicted prevailing doctrine. Carrier aviation was championed by naval aviators whom battleship admirals dismissed as novelty enthusiasts. The atomic bomb was built by physicists many generals considered impractical dreamers. Again and again, transformative innovations come from outsiders, because outsiders aren't defending the old ways of doing things. They're not invested in proving that existing doctrine works. They're not protecting careers built on mastery of systems that might become obsolete. They're just solving problems using whatever tools and perspectives they happen to possess. The tragedy is how many Daniel Weisses exist whose ideas never get tested because they don't have the rank connections or credentials to be taken seriously. How many tactical innovations died in briefing rooms because sergeants weren't considered qualified to challenge colonels? How many lives could have been saved by solutions that were dismissed because they came from the wrong person? Weiss got lucky. He sketched his idea in front of a captain willing to listen. That captain knew a colonel willing to take risks. That colonel impressed a general willing to authorize experiments. If any link in that chain had been slightly different, decoy tactics might never have existed. The lesson for modern militaries, corporations, governments, and any institution that needs innovation to survive is simple but difficult. The next transformative idea might come from anywhere. The next breakthrough might be sketched on a napkin by someone with no formal qualifications. The next tactical revolution might originate from the person everyone assumes is least qualified to contribute. And if your system can't recognize and accommodate those ideas because they come from unexpected sources, your system is actively destroying its own ability to adapt and survive. But there's one final piece of this story that remained unknown until documents were declassified in 1991, and it changes how we understand everything that came before. In June 1945, 1 month after VE Day, Weiss receives a letter forwarded through military mail. The envelope is worn passed through multiple channels before reaching him at his Kansas training base assignment. The return address lists Lieutenant Robert McIntyre, 381st Bombardment Group, currently stationed in England, awaiting transport home. Weiss doesn't recognize the name. He opens the letter carefully, uncertain what to expect. It reads, "Dear Sergeant Weiss, you don't know me, I don't know you, but on April 7, 1944, my bomber took flak over Magdeburg. We lost 2 engines and fell behind formation. I was certain we were dead. Every damaged bomber I'd seen that fell behind formation died within minutes. German fighters swarm cripples. That's just how it works. Then 3 P-47s showed up, painted to look as damaged as we were. I remember thinking, why are more damaged aircraft coming to help? We're all going to die together. The Germans came exactly like I expected. 6 Bf-109s diving from altitude. Easy kills, or so they thought. Your fighters were waiting. They dropped their damaged act and engaged at full power. Shot down 4 before the rest ran. All 10 of us made it home because of paint. Because of smoke. Because of deception. Because somebody realized that looking weak when you're strong is sometimes the best way to survive. I'm getting married next month. Girl from Baltimore named Sarah. We're going to have kids. Those kids are going to have kids. Entire generations of my family will exist because you thought differently about camouflage. I'll probably never meet you. I don't even know if this letter will reach you. But I wanted you to know that your idea didn't just save planes. It saved futures. It saved children who haven't been born yet. It saved 70 years of Christmas mornings and graduations and grandchildren and all the small moments that make life worth living. Thank you. Thank you for being creative when others were conventional. Thank you for being brave when others were cautious. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the most important battles are won with ideas before they're fought with bullets. Lieutenant Robert McIntyre, 381st Bombardment Group. Weiss keeps that letter for the rest of his life. When military historians finally track him down in 1989 to interview him about the declassified deception program, the letter is the only document he's saved from the war. Not his Legion of Merit citation, not the technical manuals he wrote, not the photographs of modified P-47s. Just one letter from a bomber pilot he never met telling him that creativity matters more than credentials, that thinking differently can save lives, that sometimes the most powerful weapon is just understanding what people see versus what actually exists. McIntyre and his wife Sarah have 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 12 great-grandchildren as of 2024. An entire family tree that exists because Daniel Weiss sketched an idea on a napkin and had the courage to present it to people who could have laughed him out of the room. From a commercial artist with a failed vision test to a tactical revolution that saved nearly 900 lives and influenced 8 decades of air combat doctrine. From a napkin sketch dismissed as insane to standard operating procedure across 3 combat theaters. From theatrical smoke and fake damage panels to the fundamental understanding that perception shapes reality in warfare as much as bullets and bombs. Daniel Weiss proved that innovation doesn't require credentials, it requires courage. The courage to see problems differently. The courage to present solutions to people who might reject them. The courage to believe that your idea might work even when experts say it won't. Between March 1944 and May 1945, his deception program directly contributed to 247 German fighters, destroyed 890 American bomber crewmen saved, and a fundamental shift in Luftwaffe doctrine that made them less aggressive and less effective for the remainder of the war. Those are the numbers that military historians record. But the real impact can't be measured in statistics. It's measured in families that exist because someone thought creatively about camouflage. It's measured in children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of men who came home from missions they statistically should not have survived. It's measured in every subsequent innovation by every subsequent outsider who looked at impossible problems and thought, what if we tried something nobody's considered? Weiss died in 2003 at age 83. His obituary in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle mentioned his 40-year career in advertising. It mentioned his wife, 2 daughters, and 5 grandchildren. It didn't mention that he changed aerial warfare. The work remained classified until 12 years before his death, and even after declassification, most people didn't know the story. He never sought recognition. He never wrote memoirs. He never attended military reunions or gave interviews beyond that single conversation with historians in 1989. When asked why he stayed silent for so long, he said something that perfectly captures the humility that enabled his innovation in the first place. "I just solved a visual problem. The Germans were looking for wounded aircraft. We showed them wounded aircraft that weren't actually wounded. It wasn't genius. It was just understanding what people see versus what's actually there. That's what advertising taught me. You want people to see what you want them to see. I did that with cold cream. I did it with cigarettes. I did it with fighter planes. Same principle, different application." But it was genius. The genius of seeing connections others missed. The genius of applying expertise from unexpected domains. The genius of understanding that warfare is psychology before it's technology. The genius of having an idea and the courage to present it even when you're just a technical sergeant with an art degree facing colonels and generals who've spent their entire lives studying combat. If you've ever had an idea that people dismissed because you didn't have the right credentials, remember Daniel Weiss. If you've ever thought differently about a problem but stayed silent because you assumed experts knew better, remember the 890 men who came home because one person refused to stay silent. If you've ever wondered whether creativity matters in systems dominated by tradition and hierarchy, remember that theatrical smoke and painted damage defeated one of the most experienced air forces in history. The most dangerous weapon isn't always the one you build in a factory. Sometimes it's the one you sketch on a napkin. Sometimes it's the one that makes the enemy see weakness where strength exists. Sometimes it's the one created by someone nobody expected to change anything. And sometimes the most important victory is just having the courage to say, "What if we tried this?" even when everyone thinks you're crazy. Because crazy ideas sketched on napkins by unexpected people change the world more often than you'd think. They saved 890 lives in 1944. They're still saving lives today through doctrine they influenced decades ago. And they'll keep saving lives as long as militaries remember that innovation comes from creativity, not credentials. That's the real lesson of Daniel Weiss. That's why this story matters. That's what makes a Brooklyn advertising artist who failed his pilot exam more important to the Allied victory than most generals whose names fill history books. He understood that what the enemy believes matters more than what actually exists. And he had the courage to weaponize that understanding when it mattered most.